No canned music today. There we go.
Welcome into Orange and Blue today. He's Andrew Mason. I'm Will Peterson, hanging out on this Friday afternoon. Hope you're doing well, maybe getting stocked up before this big storm potentially comes to Denver. And speaking of big storms, Andrew Mason, we were both caught in one 10 years ago today. Well, I guess the next day, because we were trying to leave New York after Super Bowl 48. A 43-8 beat down the Seahawks over the Broncos. We don't want to be Debbie Downers, but we do have to acknowledge the anniversary of one of the darker days in Broncos history. Mase, your memories of that week, that day, that night in New York. I know you were there covering the game.
First of all, if it weren't the 10th anniversary, it wouldn't be coming up. We're not bringing this up at 9, 11, 8, 12, whatever. I say we never commemorate this again after today, the 10th. Okay, we're not doing 15, 20, 25. It's done. Okay. It's story time with Mase here. First of all, I was working on the Broncos team digital operation on a contract basis at the time. And I'll never forget having brunch with the rest of our staff. And the conversation is about what's going to happen if, when they win, how to cover the trophy presentation, is someone going to be shooting photos at the party afterward, all that. And I finally brought up, this team could lose this game, right?
Right.
And part of it was, one of my things that I've been doing is I've been writing some scouting reports on the Seahawks. So I had watched their last 6 games before the Super Bowl in their entirety, and I could see how fast they were on defense, and the Broncos had not seen anything like this. And honestly, I was getting a little worried as I was watching the Seahawks film, especially their defensive film. I was worried about Percy Harvin because 2 years earlier when the Broncos went to Minnesota, one of the games in the Tebow run in the back half of that season, Percy Harvin nearly single-handedly won that game for the Minnesota Vikings at the Metrodome. So it was really interesting. And I think the confidence in that meeting, in that digital sphere, kind of reflected what in retrospect was an overconfidence from the Denver Broncos that they were going to win that game. It was a culmination, right, of all these records broken. You know what the funny thing is, Will? It's that very few teams that have offenses of that level, that an all-time type level, that get to the Super Bowl, very few of them win, right? Atlanta, 2016, lost to the Patriots. The best offense the Patriots ever took to a Super Bowl, an all-timer back in 2007. They lose to the Giants. Going way back, Washington setting all kinds of records in 1983. They lost the Raiders 38-9. It's really interesting to look that when you had these all-time offenses and they got to the Super Bowl, they lost. All-time defenses that get to the Super Bowl, like the one the Broncos had 2 years later, they tend to win.
Right. Okay, so your digital meeting kind of, took things off to a bad start, even though you were the one who did throw in, hey, what if we lose? I'll tell you my story. So I was out there covering it for a different outlet at the time, and credentials to the actual game were very hard to come by. Our entire outlet only got one credential. So I wasn't there long enough to get it. It wasn't going to be me. So we went ahead and we bought tickets. And the tickets came, this was back with paper tickets. The tickets came with a sticky note that said, "Go Hawks," smiley face. And we're like, that's a little strange. So me and my buddy in our Broncos gear get to our section. We are in a Seahawks season ticket holder section. surrounded by Seattle fans. We got the 2 tickets that the 1 season ticket holder sold, and we said, you know what? We'll just have a few pops, and they'll win, and we'll just talk our smack, and life will go on. Well, we had a few pops, but we didn't have any smack to talk, Mase, because the ball goes over Peyton Manning's head. It's a safety. They never get on track. Even at halftime, down 22-0, some folks thought they still had a chance. But, of course, Matt Prater's kick comes up short. I don't know if that was by design or not. I've been told it wasn't. And Percy Harvin takes it to the house, and the game is over. So that's my memories of that day. I tell people I went to a very expensive Bruno Mars concert, Mase.
The halftime show was the best part of the game if you're a Bronco fan. It's funny that that short Matt Prater kickoff to start the second half. One of the things I remember is looking over as the Broncos came out of the tunnel, even down 22-0, when they came back onto the field, they briefly had kind of a bounce in their step, kind of the thought, okay, this team scored more points than any other in NFL history, right?
Right.
More touchdown passes, more yards, all that we're gonna, you kind of got that sense as I was looking at him come out of the tunnel, like they're gonna, we're gonna guess stop, guess score, get back in this game. And then when Harvin took it the distance through the kickoff coverage, I looked over on the sideline. There on the Fox broadcast, there was a shot of Peyton Manning just kind of looking off to the side, and you can see the camera shaking because the Seahawk fans are going so crazy, and Peyton's just kind of. Well, it looked like he was looking at the replay board, watching it. And I remember when Harvin crossed the goal line, I started writing my post game pieces. I'm like, oh, yep, they're not coming back from this. It's done. It was absolutely done. And that's the second half. It was interesting. It was like everyone had a chance to just process it because it was such a lousy game. It's not a heartbreaking result. Heartbreaking is the year before Raheem Moore letting the pass go over his fingers. Broncos lose that game in overtime. That's heartbreaking. When you get kicked 43-8 and you don't put any points on the board until it's 36-0, that's not heartbreaking. You've basically had an hour and a half at minimum to accept that your team has lost the game. I remember, and then the bus ride back to the hotel, dead silence.
Were you with the players at that point?
The players and staff kind of were intermingling on the bus, and so there were some players on the bus, and it was just just not a word was said. There was a party. This is the other thing. If there's a post-game party, not only for the team that wins, but they also do one for the team that loses. It's all planned, right? Yeah, and so it was played by Jimmy Fallon's house band, The Roots.
Okay. How many people went to said party?
Oh, when I got down there were quite a few people there. I mean, I think everyone went by at some point. And I grabbed a few bites to eat, talked to a couple of people, and then went.
Oh, we lost Mase. Hopefully he'll get back here in a moment.
Yeah. After you've watched that, experience that, you don't want to go to a party. And then the next day, it's funny you talk about a storm getting out. So the Broncos, the team buses, they go to the hangar, and they board the charter, the 747 in the hangar. It's snowing outside, but I figure, okay, I'm gonna get this thing underway. So I crash in my seat, like just some exhausted sleep. I sleep for 2 hours, and I look down at my watch, realize what time it is, and I think, oh great, probably halfway home, right? And then I pull up my window shade. The plane's still in the hangar. So on top of everything else, it took so dadgum long to get out because of the storm the day after. It was just, oh man, everything about that trip. And there are some stories I know that I'm not really going to tell.
I've heard some chatter over the years about some shenanigans that went on that week in New York.
Yeah, it was not a team that really was ready to go for that game. And then, of course, and I wrote about this at denversports.com this morning, infamously not practicing with crowd noise because John Fox figured the crowd noise was, based on his experience, wasn't what it was for a normal road game. So the speakers were turned down. And then right there on the first snap, as you experienced there in your section, the Seahawks fans, the 12s, are going crazy. Manny Ramirez can't hear, miscommunication. Peyton comes forward, the ball goes over his shoulder. I mean, yeah, it's from an on-field perspective, what's worse, that or 70 points on the board?
Probably that.
Because of the consequential nature of the Super Bowl.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a day I'll never forget. And I like that you use the word not heartbreaking, because the worst loss of my life, I'm 33 years old, was the loss to Baltimore, the Raheem Moore loss. Like, I was numb after that game. I physically remember not being able to move. I was so upset. The Super Bowl was just like, well, they just got destroyed, but I'm not sitting here going, what could have been, because there was never a what could have been. The Seahawks were so thoroughly dominant and so much better that day.
Yeah, and you look back on it, and there are a lot of reasons why it happened. Some of them within the Broncos' control, like they could have practiced with noise. Some of them, you look on that field, especially on defense, and look, and the Seahawks did score all three phases. They scored, they scored offense, defense, special teams. They had the Harvin touchdown. They had, Peyton Manning hit, Malcolm Smith to the end zone with a score. But the Broncos might have been able to stay in it if they'd had a full strength defense, right? But you looked out on that field and you looked over on the sideline. You saw Von Miller wearing a jacket. You had Derek Wolfe wearing a jacket. You had Chris Harris Jr. He just torn his ACL a couple of games earlier. Even Raheem Moore, who actually had a good season that year, suffered season-ending compartment syndrome in his leg and wasn't available for that game. You're looking on the field and you're seeing respect to these guys, but you're seeing a lot of Tony Carter, a lot of Dookie Inacho, a lot of Paris Lennon, and even some diehard Bronco fans maybe listening to those names and saying, who? Exactly.
Well, Jeremy Mincy started the Super Bowl that day, too. I always say Jeremy Mincy and Paris Lennon. Again, not personal. But they were just not household names by any stretch.
And Jeremy Mincy, literally earlier that week, was getting seasick. This is another. There were so many levels of bizarreness to the week.
The boats.
The Broncos did their media interviews on boats because there wasn't enough room in the Hyatt there in Jersey City. They brought in boats, like casino party boats, to host the media festivities. And I was talking with Jeremy Mincy, but I happened to be in a position where he was looking at the window, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Can we switch sides here? Because I can see us pitching on the boat." And he was getting nervous. He was getting seasick, looking at kind of the up and down, up and down. Meanwhile, the Seahawks were in a Westin. They did their media stuff in ballrooms, like is normal at a Super Bowl. Everything there was copacetic. I mean, fun
story about the Seahawks is I went to their availability, and I was trying to get Marshawn Lynch to talk. And I was one of the people that Marshawn Lynch, the next year, I'm just here so I don't get fined, because at 48, he wouldn't talk to any of us. And the next day, I ended up on the front page of the sports section. Is that you?
That's me, yeah.
The fire alarm?
Yeah, the alarm sometimes goes off.
Okay. Are you safe to continue the show, or do you need to evacuate?
I have a balcony here. I can step out on that. I'll be fine.
Okay. I'll tell my story.
Famous last words. But no, I'll just hang here.
Okay.
It goes off. It goes off. Unfortunately, from time to time. So anyway.
Anyways, I ended up on the front page of the New York Times sports section, the side of my face, trying to talk to Marshawn Lynch. I still have a copy of it somewhere, but
I was gonna say, did you save it? Yeah, you had to
I
save
have
that
it somewhere. And that was cool. And of course, I was on Sports Center and getting memed by all my buddies because I was right there trying to talk to Marshawn.
Oh my gosh,
that was a fun week for me. And then you mentioned the boat. I didn't feel good. Now that was probably my own fault for what happened the night before. Longer story. But I went and sat down on the boat because I wasn't feeling so hot. And all of a sudden I look, and I'm sitting next to Peyton Manning waiting to do his media availability while John Fox was at the podium. And Peyton gives me kind of these, hey, and I'm like, hey, Peyton. And it was just like, oh my gosh, this is like so morbidly embarrassing that I don't feel good. I'm sitting down on this boat. And I didn't even realize I picked the seat next to Peyton Manning, which frankly, I'm probably not supposed to be sitting here, but I was. So that's how it all ended up working out for me.
They didn't tell you not to, right? I mean, what do it's any port in a storm, as they say.
I didn't get yelled at.
Oh my, it was. Yeah, like I mean, every Super Bowl week is. I mean, look, it's a different environment. Like I've been thinking about next week. And kind of making my own plan for how to go about bringing the stuff back to Denver. And obviously, like I think one story that Denver fans are going to be interested in is Randy Gregory, right? Randy Gregory, though, sometimes he's talked about his anxiety issues.
Yes.
So, and I'm thinking to myself, good gravy. I already feel bad for him that he's going to go in an environment where he's going to have to do media Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, because on Tuesday they'll only choose like 10 players for each team on the off day to do media. But it's like it's always different. It's always a bit bizarre. But that week in particular, what the Broncos were dealing with, it was unusual to the all the way through. They had a long commute to their practice facility because they were in Jersey City. They went out to the Jets facility. I think the Seahawks went to the Giants facility, which was like 15 minutes away. The Broncos, they went about like 35 minutes to the Jets facility out in Florham Park. Mm-hmm. The other thing, remember the Broncos changed hotels the night before the game.
They did.
They stayed out at a hotel closer to the Jets facility. It was the hotel they had stayed at back in week 2 when they'd played the Giants and won. So they went back there the night before the Super Bowl. The whole thing was to kind of get away from it all because by then, like, families had shown up and were in the hotel and all that. And it turned out, a fat lot of good that did. A couple of years later, the Broncos didn't do that. Players stay at the hotel. Families were right there the night before the game. They won against the Carolina Panthers. It was the contrast in those weeks, Will. It's stunning to look back on.
I was at both of them. I feel the same way. I was around the Seahawks, and the Seahawks were loose and confident and embracing the underdog role. And the Broncos, shenanigans, whatever, overconfidence, whatever you want to call it, you didn't get a good vibe from them.
Yeah, not at all.
50, the Broncos were the humble team, the underdogs, the big defense, and the Carolina Panthers could not have been more arrogant, cocky, overconfident. And I did a radio hit from San Francisco where I said, this is giving me Super Bowl 48 vibes, except the roles are flipped. The Panthers are overconfident, and the Broncos are embracing the underdog role. The Broncos are going to win this game. And I only knew that because I had seen it at Super Bowl 48 with the roles reversed.
Yeah, and Cam Newton that week was up in his head a little bit. That was right to the end, right to even after the game when he's doing his press conference and he can hear Chris Harris Jr. talking behind the partition about how they took apart the Carolina offense. It did end well for the Broncos as a franchise, getting to Super Bowl 50 and winning. But you do think about all those that were on the Super Bowl 48 team that weren't a part of Super Bowl 50 and they never got a ring. Champ Bailey, it turned out that was his last game. He played for the Saints, was cut after the preseason, never played a regular season game or postseason again. You think about good players: Zane Beadles, No Sean Moreno, Orlando Franklin, Broncos for multiple years, Eric Decker, right? They never got another chance.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are not going to talk about the Senior Bowl as much as I would like to because I want to do it justice and I don't want to try to squeeze it in at the end of the show here. So Mase and Cecil will be back next week. Plenty of Senior Bowl chatter. Mase, glad to see you're home safely, and hope this 20-minute path down the Super Bowl 48 road puts some closure on it. We never have to do it again. I'm taking the fire alarm as an omen. They don't want us talking about this ever
That's
again.
That's the sign. I hope it didn't cause too many troubles for those listening. But this is my welcome back to Denver. Is the fire alarm going off after being away for a couple of weeks?
All right. With that, we wish everyone a safe and happy weekend. Stay warm, and Cecil, we'll catch you next week.